Thank you. Yes, it is. Okay, we good to go? Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Thanks for coming out. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. My name is Alex. I've been a friend of this congregation for about 9 months, and I'm here volunteering for Jay, and I'd love to invite you to open your gray hymnal to number 175. We celebrate the web of life. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing. Thank you. Our next hymn is also in the gray. It's number 174. O earth, you are surpassing fair. Our final hymn is actually in your order of service. If you open it up, you'll find the words, "To this land is your land." And that'll be our final hymn for the morning. Whenever you're ready. Take a moment, greet your neighbors. I need to find that shaker next to it. Build it up a little. It is long. Hear them down there.
I just had to find my opening words in
of course.
Pile.
Yeah, sorry, that's me.
No.
Okay. You want me to ring the bell?
Anytime, yeah.
Anytime, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll move that a second.
May the light of truth illumine our minds. May the spark of love set our hearts on fire. May the flame of freedom burn brightly within us, now and always.
I'd like to invite you to join your hearts and minds in the spirit of worship with these words by Claire Roussel. They are wanting to tell us something, the future people, the people of whom we are the ancestors, yet they are the wiser. They want to tell us what we do now matters. They want us to know that they see the dismembered ways that we live and how difficult it is for us excuse me, to remember how to return to the family of all things. But their existence is testament to the fact that it is possible. They know we feel trapped in this system of entanglements and obligations and the amputations of our imaginations, in a system that only ever intended to keep us blind to the bars of our cages. But they want to remind us that there was a time when we could not imagine a world order that was not based on the divine right of kings. And before that even, there was a time when we knew what it was to belong, when we knew we were the firefly and the ocean, the stuff of stars and the breath of birds.
Good morning. Marguerite Mills has worked here as our Director of Lifespan Religious Education for 14 years. She brought us professional experience in management and volunteer experience working with youth and children, and made a commitment to learn and grow in every way she could as a professional religious educator. We have all observed how she has learned and grown from what we think of as on-the-job training. What we have not observed directly, but have benefited from, is her academic work with the Unitarian Universalist Professional Development to become a Credentialed Religious Educator. She has completed 2 years of written work, including a portfolio of 9 competencies, several essays, and read an extensive reading resource list. The process culminated in early April with a trip to San Diego to appear before the RE Credentialing Committee, where she passed with flying colors. Now she has earned the right to put CRE after her name, which means that those in the UU world of religious education know that she has a professional level of experience and expertise. In this season of graduations, we celebrate Marguerite's achievement. Marguerite, would you please come forward?
So 2 weeks ago, Marguerite and I led the congregation as we dedicated ourselves to 11 babies and children in this church with rosebuds from which the thorns were carefully removed. Those buds symbolize their vulnerable innocence, their potential to bloom into full flower, and our commitment to protect and nurture them as they grew. Last week, we celebrated 2 young people who are graduating from 9 years of church school with roses in full bloom, complete with thorns. They symbolize their years of growth and learning that resulted in the flowering of maturity, allowing them to care for themselves. Marguerite was with them every step of the way on that journey. So this week, it is our honor to celebrate your achievements, Marguerite, living what you teach, to be curious and disciplined learners all the days of our life. We want to mark this major accomplishment in your professional development with the roses in full bloom, each with a thorn or 2. And what we've done is there's 3 roses, and then there's flowers for all the other years that you have been here to celebrate everything that you brought to us. 14 years of service to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville.
We are proud of the religious educator you have become, and will continue to honor our covenant to work together with love and respect now that you are a credentialed religious educator. Congratulations.
And now we'll sing our children to class, using the blessing on the inside back cover of your gray hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Valerie Martin. I am a co-chair of Worship Committee and a member of Nominating Committee, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here in the sanctuary and those joining us online to worship this morning. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present on Sunday morning, our services are live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. Joys and concerns are not live streamed or recorded. Before I continue, let me remind you to silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We deepen our relationships as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask you to wear the paper name tags because it helps us recognize you as someone we'd like to meet. If you're seeking a spiritual home, we hope you may find it here. Whether you are new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service to have any questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and finances. If you are considering joining the church, please talk to our assistant minister, Denise Gouch. Following the service, we hope everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are many announcements in the weekly bulletin that I hope you will take home and read. Thank you. And I have a few more here for you. We have a budget problem and we need your help.
Our budget goal for 2019 to 2020 was $650,000, and we have received commitments of $593,576, which is a $56,000 shortfall. Member commitments provide over 90% of our budget. On the assumption that everyone has already pledged as much as they feel they can, the board needs your thoughts about budget priorities. So the Fund Board of Directors invites you to join in a discussion here in the sanctuary today at 12:30 p.m. for a conversation about where to make responsible cuts in our goal budget and bring it in line with the reality of our financial commitments. Options will be presented as conversation starters. And if you have not already pledged or want to increase your pledge, it's not too late. Go to the big blue button on the Fund website and fill out the form. Today at 10:15 a.m., all listening campaign participants are invited to join Fun and NOAA volunteers in the fireside room for a discussion of the campaign and its results. Issues relating mainly to Fun were identified in the interviews, and we will discuss how these issues can be addressed in the church. Also, anyone interested in learning more about the Issues Convention is invited to attend. And this year's annual congregational meeting is Sunday, June 9th at 9 a.m. in the sanctuary in place of the early service. At the congregational meeting, we will be voting on renewing our welcoming congregation status with the UUA. By voting yes, we will recognize that each of us has worth and dignity, while affirming that worth and dignity includes all gender identities and sexualities. That we not only open our doors to people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, but that we value all sexualities and gender identities and see them all as a spiritual gift. If you have any questions about what it means to be a welcoming congregation, you are invited to stop by the social justice table in the social hall. They have donuts.
I'd like to invite you all to take a deep breath. Bring yourself more fully present to this sacred space, to this gathered community, and to yourself. And as you become more fully present to yourself, you may become more aware of those moments from the last weeks or days or hours that you bring here with you, especially those moments that have struck your spirit at its heart. If any of you have such a profound joy, sorrow, or celebration that you'd like to bring here to this gathered community, you're invited to do so. Our lay minister this morning, Becky, will help you. She has these stones, and we place them in this water, which is a symbol of our gathered community. And if you would like Becky Bowman or myself to read of those joys or concerns, there's yellow slips in the paper that you can write on in the pews. And if you write it legibly, we will be able to read them to you. I invite you to hold these joys, this concern, as well as all those that lay unspoken in your hearts in the spirit of prayer. And this is a prayer from a poem by Denise Levertov. We have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt that we have done to each other that cannot be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. Blessed be, and amen. At this time, we will receive our offering. As you know, 1/2 of those cash in our offering goes to an organization that is sharing our mission outside of our church. This month we are giving it to Project Return, which has been an amazing organization. Its executive director is a member of our church, and for years they have served people, all people getting out of prison and helping them settle in the world. And I just want to thank you so much for your ongoing generosity.
Fell with heart, tried my way, fell apart. Found the moon all alone, sat on a skipping stone, feeling your heart was gone. But me and the moon, I'll always have me and the moon, and the sky. I see better with my own eyes, and the soul my parents gave me. I like you are. Fickle hearts aren't made for loving.
Our reading is a continuation of the poem by Claire Roussel. They are wanting to ask us something, the future people. They ask us, stroking our hair and touching our faces, how did you know that something else was possible? Tell us the story of summoning your brothers and sisters to revolt for a life of connection and dignity. For what dignity is possible if dignity is not available for all? They ask us, how did you manage to build this world in the flames of capitalism, and yet all the while you were disconnected from your rituals, from the rhythms and songs of your people, the tiny sacred acts of care that ensure that the world is recreated with every dawn chorus? How did you handle knowing that all you knew without becoming paralyzed with terror and despair? What did you do with your despair, personal, collective, ancestral? How did you carry its magnitude in your heart without becoming overwhelmed, overcome with madness, or perhaps while carrying your madness, your addictions and your chronic sadness, never really knowing the full extent of your vitality? Did you taste it in your food, forced from the soil and sea with chemicals and violence, food that no longer nourished but flared up in rashes and welts as it entered your body? Did you feel the suffering as you dressed yourself in the forced labor of people and animals, their exhaustion stitched into the seams and hems of your clothes? We see you, they say, standing on the shore with 500 years of industry and environmental wreckage and slavery and torture at your back, gasping under its weight with only the vast black sea in front of you. We see you. We see you holding the crumbling world in one hand and the germinating seed of life in the other. We know you are listening to your children, to the wind, to the birds, to the voice that startles you from sleep just before dawn, to the harbingers of new consciousness. We feel how you allow your heart to be broken while every day preparing your home for love, making up your bed, all with no good reason for hope and every reason for despair. We see what has come for you, and what will remain when the storm from which there will be no refuge is over. We see in you the thousands of varieties of potato and corn and wheat, the cornucopia of culture and craft, language and art, the compassion and commitment to the value of life of the individual and the group. We know what you have known across time and species, across geography and incarnation. We know what you are capable of. We salute you because what you do now matters. For our meditation, I invite you to center yourself, whatever that means for you. Wiggle around, get comfortable. Maybe allow the eyes to fall closed. As you sit here in this room, in this community, with your many, many roles, the roles within your family, your friendships, your job, your volunteer commitments. Just for right now, imagine all of those roles dropping away like leaves from an autumn tree, leaving only your essence behind. You, this human animal, a temporary resident of this place that is at once incredibly painful and heartbreakingly beautiful. Feel your breath moving into these lungs that allow you to participate in life here. Just be. May it be so.
I'd like to invite you to open your gray hymnal to number 119, Once to Every Soul and Nation. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing.
So Roussel, who is an echo warrior in South Africa, imagine what the ancestors would tell us. She imagined us holding the crumbling world in one hand and germinating seeds in the other. And I don't need to imagine it. I see it every day. For instance, I see people holding their cell phone in one hand, and that cell phone, they're working on their personal brand because they have what was once. They're curating who they are to the public because their so-called middle-class job, they know they're totally disposable, and they really work in a gig economy, even though right now they have a job, and they always have to be ready to sell themselves to maybe the lowest bidder next time. Maybe you could think of them as holding the fact that they are a commodity in this culture. They're not a person with dignity and worth. And then I see people holding in that other hand, germinating seeds. So how many here actually literally work in the ground, try to germinate seeds, or planting gardens so they have something to eat? Raise your hand. Have chickens or ducks to bring food. How many of you here have done something to help the environmental justice movement in some way through like the Cumberland? Yeah, okay, lots of you. See? So you're holding germinating seeds in this hand. But as one person here told me, it's like straddling two worlds, right? You're straddling, and does that get wider and wider? And I get to a point in that straddling where I just can't do a split anymore. It just throws me off balance, and I feel like falling over. Because I also see us struggling to hold those germinating seeds. I hear people, for instance, talking about, should I have children? Should I have children at all? Because it's selfish. Because they're just going to become more consumers. They're going to use up more of this precious world. That is a total loss of hope, and yet based on what they see in this crumbling world, isn't it? So, as we were looking at this, we were asking, what truths do we need to explore to hold the crumbling world and the germinating seeds? And I have to tell you, as I'm thinking about beloveds here, thinking of themselves as commodities to be bought and sold, as I think of beloveds here, thinking about future children becoming nothing but consumers, all I could think about is economic justice. How does this economy make us commodities who use commodities and not sentient beings in a universe that is sentient being, living ecological systems with dignity and worth that is inherent, that we do not judge by what you bring in the marketplace. So, we live in a capitalist society. That sounds like, what in the world does that mean? Well, capitalism by definition is ever-increasing capital, which is not products direct, it's twice or three times removed from that. It's this idea of money, or other things even more removed from money, pieces of paper that say there's money. No, it's not pieces of paper anymore, is it? It's a digital universe that says there's money. And that increase is based on ever-increasing use of resources. Now, when I say the word resources, I realize that sounds like kind of just this word that has no emotional impact for me. But when I realize that by resources they mean using up as not as you just can use it up and throw it away. People and the earth and animals and plants, just using it up until it's gone, then it has some emotional impact for me. And that's the truth. Now, Marx figured out a long time ago, just logically, that we live in a world of finite resources, and that logically capitalism would have to end someday. And that was in the days when we still had colonialization, which was simply the drive to find more people and resources to use up. But now we have reached every corner of the world. We see that we're destroying the air, the water, the weather. There's very few minerals left to dig up. And maybe we've used up every corner of the earth. Maybe the end of capitalism has already come, and our terror and despair comes from, what the F? What's coming next? I mean it. What is it? Because don't we like to know? We do. We like to know. But we don't. Now, some people think, and have good arguments, that capitalism hasn't ended yet, and that we can still adjust it, that we can put limits around it, we can somehow limit growth, that we can somehow limit the use of resources. I would say most of our democratic politicians who are running on some variation of that. And we can listen to that. I'm skeptical. I am very skeptical, because how can you base, you're still using up resources. You're still using up resources if you're talking about capital and not actual products. So I am skeptical. And then some people put their faith in what people call neoliberalism, which is a global capitalism, which is based on, how to say it, streams of fictional money. And I'll talk a little more about that. And I'd just like to suggest that the crash in 2008 showed us that basing things on fictional money, products that are really gambling on things that don't exist, Ponzi schemes based on things that don't exist, only in the mind, have shown that putting all our trust and faith in the ether has its limits. Crash. So I think I also hear people talking about, should we go back? Should we go back? I mean, I was a great proponent of going back to tribal living. But let's face it, we learn a lot from that. I'm not saying that we don't. But we understand the whole globe. We understand the science. We understand what we've already done that's damaged things. We understand too much to know that we could go back to a pure tribal local life. That's part of it, but it's not everything. People talk about going back to certain kind of socialist democracies, communisms. Those are all so historically embedded that it's hard to imagine an economic system without those historical embedded things. So I am suggesting that we're going to have to make something up as we go along. Okay? So what I'm suggesting, though, is that to make something up as we go along, the people who are actually doing that effectively, one thing they're doing is learning about how the economic system works now. And so one of my teachers is sitting here in the congregation. He wrote this book, An Insider's Memoir, How Economics Changed to Work Against Us, from Smith to Marx to Bitcom, Gordon Brown. We call him Bryant, I learned. Okay, so he lives half the time in Canada and half the time here. So we only get him in the winter, and he's leaving again soon. But he was a businessman, I guess once a businessman, always a businessman. He also did a lot of volunteer work for international things, so he was all over the world doing development and involved in advising people in the Canadian government. And he noticed that capitalism changed a lot from when he started being a businessman in the 70s to now. And it's a great story in the book. And we're going to make sure he comes back next winter and teaches us all a lot about what he's spent the last 7 years researching. But I realized reading his book how much of this, my understanding of economics, and you know, I have been out there doing actions for economic justice for 25 years, and I thought I knew a lot about economics, and I realized so much of what I thought I knew was mythology. We live in we think we're not mythological people anymore, and that we're above all that, and we can really see the truth, and we don't believe all this religious BS and all that. Economically, we live in this created mythology that is, as I feel, as unattached to reality as a lot of ancient mythology. So I'm just going to give one example. I thought the United States of America, that we printed our own money. I thought that. And actually, it was true when I was a child. In the early 1970s, Nixon, okay, I don't get political, but I never liked Nixon, and now I really don't like him. He went off with 10 other bankers and people, and they figured out we were going to go off the gold standard, the United States. And then they figured out within a couple years that we were going to not print our own money, that the Fed, the Federal Reserve was going to do it. Okay, so what's the problem with that? I thought the Federal Reserve was kind of a branch of the U.S. government, right? Like the Supreme Court or Congress or, it's not. Yes, Congress in 1913, with 3 years of lobbying by bankers who had designed the Fed, they had designed it so it has a relationship to the federal government, but it is owned and controlled by bankers, by the industry of banking. And now it's international because it also has the International Monetary Fund. So, and the World Bank. So, think about it. I never thought about this. And you can check this, because I didn't hardly believe it. Is Bryant like a conspiracy theorist? You had to check it out. Turns out he's right. But we all need to learn and check it out and try to study this, because it's so different than what my mythology was. Now, why does this matter? Well, we never had long-term federal debt before we didn't print our own money. Because if we were going to fund a war, World War I, World War II, if we were going to fund a whole railroad systems, a whole highway system after World War II, you did a balance. You could give yourself loans without compound interest, and you're paying back to yourself as a country. And so you're constantly feeding yourself with your tax money. You are not paying it outside. But as soon as the Fed started printing money, what was the gain for them? The gain for them was now we pay the money to the banks with compound interest, and now we own more money to international banks than could ever be repaid. Could ever be repaid. And then we're told to have an austerity budget. Even here at church, when we don't raise enough money, we're told we have to have an austerity budget. And, well, that kind of works in our households because we can't print money. But what happens when people borrow money from, let's say you're Greece, and you borrow money from the monetary bank, for the World Bank, from what they do, and which they've done a lot. They borrow a lot of money, and then the bank says you can have this bank loan because they get to set limits on what you do. So they say, well, you have to get rid of some of your public industries. Like you have to privatize your bank, you have to privatize your utilities, you have to privatize your resources, and then the economy sinks. And then they say, well, and you have to pay us back. So you have austerity. Well, guess who it's a steer for? It's a steer for the poor. They get poorer and poorer. And who follow the money? Guess who gets rich? Well, it's very specific people who have owned banks in Germany for Greece. Very specific people. So we know the world is getting fewer and fewer richer people. 17 families own 1% of the wealth in the world. 17 families now. And everybody else is getting poorer and poorer. We know that those of us who think we're middle class are just pretending, right? We know that. So the countries that have just defaulted on their debt, Iceland, Costa Rica, they're all doing really fine, thank you. They set up their own country banks again, because they had them before. They defaulted on that debt, and they put their money into their people. Healthcare, education, job training, using their resources for themselves. Okay? So, this is not what I thought, and I'm saying that there's more and more that I learn every day. I learn something. All mistakes are my own because I feel like I am just a newbie in understanding some of this. So as I say this, I am inviting you to do research on what we are economically now that creates this tension, this split that is pulling us apart. It's that song that I grew up with. Once to every soul in nation comes the moment to decide, to weigh the truth and falsehood. So that's my invitation to you. We need to weigh truths and falsehoods about our economic reality if we want to save ourselves and the rest of our planet. So, number one, that's the first thing to do, but that's kind of looking at the crumbling world, right? So then we're still holding the germinating seeds, and I invite you all to please hold the germinating seeds, whatever that is for you. One of the things that we know is what keeps us from total despair are things like Alex singing about the relationship with the moon and the beauty of our relationship with each other and the earth, with all sentient beings. Those relationships can be loving. They can be renewing. They can help us make decisions about where to make our next step. They can keep us whole. Those relationships that remind us over and over again that we are of inherent worth and dignity, that our children do not have to be on this planet only to use commodities, that they are whole and holy, that together as communities we can support one another in this work. Now, emerging economies, new ways to think about economies, are bubbling up, mostly through the environmental movement, I've noticed. They are bubbling up. Knowing about those has increased my reading list for the next 25 years. Valerie and I decided I have to live my full lifespan of 95 years to understand, to begin to understand and imagine. But I'm an artist, and I know that co-creation works. I know that people who are working on environmental justice, thinking about it, are changing our ideas about philosophy, changing, writing, examining a new kind of environmental economy that is sustainable. Not just sustainable in your tribe, but sustainable in the whole planet. That takes vast imagination. And a lot of people are doing that both. We're dreaming, yes, and thinking about what it means for us to love each other, love all of each other, but also analyzing what would work. These are our resources, human and environmental. And how do we do that sustainable all the long time? And we have people working on trying different ways to do that. And then we have our young people. This young movement of what? Kids that are 13, 14, 15 years old, striking from school all over the world, saying, you forgot one of the human rights. It actually should be a right, a right to have a future world for the generations following us to live in. A human right. They're reimagining justice for us all. So in the end, whether you're germinating seeds, holding in reality that crumbling world, asking up the truth about it, I invite you to go back over and over again to that loving, reciprocal, mutual relationship with the rest of the world. I do want to say that one thing that Bryant invites us all to do is to understand that when we support the public sector, we are helping divert this move of neoliberalism towards the myth that the private organizations can do a better job than the public. I'll give you an example. Right here in Nashville, we know that we have given incredible tax increment financing to Amazon, one of the largest corporations, richest corporations in the world. Talk about concentrating wealth. And their goal is to get even bigger and not giving raises to our public workers, which we have not given them raises since 2008. And so then what is the solution that they just came up with, the mayor? Sell off our parking to a private organization for short-term gain. They already sold off some land to give a small raise to the workers, but long-term, again, giving it away. So the last thing I want to say, I always end with a pitch for Noah, right? That's not, some people think I do. Nashville Organized for Action and Hope does a lot of work locally to support the private sector to be just and to represent the people and not the monetization of this city. And I would invite some of you, we're doing a week from Sunday in the afternoon, a new issues campaign convention where we've been looking at the issues. People here came up with their top issues in last month, and it was affordable housing, public education, and I can't remember the third one, but economic justice. And we invite you all to come. We have 20 votes as a congregation, so we would like at least 20 of you to come, and there'll be information up at the social home. So that's a way that you can help hold a germinating seed in one hand. So thank you, everyone. May we weigh the truth with falsehood and make decisions how to be ancestors, good ancestors for the future.
Our closing hymn for today is number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing.
Love will guide
Please join me in the chalice extinguishing. The words can be found at the bottom of your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. There we go.
These closing words are by Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, and the path is not clear. The stakes are high. Take courage, for deep down there is a truth. We are not alone. The service is over. Let our service begin again, renewed.